Okay, so I'm gonna start with the flour. Well, this is how I measure my flour. I take a spoon and I pour into the cup, just lightly so. And then you take a knife and you level it out. Now you want to do this because flour is packed again, so if you measure it like this, that is not 1 cup of flour. That is more than 1 cup, way more than 1 cup of flour. And when you put it on the scale, it should equal to 120 grams. So 1 cup of flour equals to 120 grams. So if you don't have a scale, that's how you measure it, so that you can get a little bit more accuracy. But this is not 1 cup. I'm gonna show a demonstration where I put this in a jar, in a bowl, and then we'll see if that can fit again in the same cup. So I'm just gonna measure out 4 cups because I'm doing half of 5 liters of scones. So that's 4 cups of flour. And then I'm gonna add my half a cup of sugar. I use a tablespoon because that's faster. So 1 tablespoon equals 1 teaspoon. So because we're doing half, I'm gonna do 5 tablespoons. So that's 3, and I'm just gonna eyeball it. So that's probably 5. And then I'm just gonna mix everything in. Now for the other ingredients, as you can see, these are the eggs that I'm gonna use. I just took them out of the fridge and let them just sit on the counter while I mix everything, because I don't want to use them straight out of the fridge. I find that it messes with the texture of the dough, and when it goes into the oven, it just becomes something else. So we want to use just cold ingredients. The only thing that you want to use straight out of the fridge is the butter. So at least if your eggs and your Cup Maas are just cool, not hot or room temperature, but they should be my Cup Maas is also out of the fridge, so I'm gonna place it here and put this aside. Alright, so here's my margarine. Now because I'm not doing 5 liter, I'm just gonna use 250 grams. 1, 2, and 1, 2. And you find somewhere in the middle to cut. And you make your indentation, and then you're gonna cut through. Right, and then the side that you're gonna use, you're just going to make it into some blocks. You can even use a grater, but I avoid using a grater because you want to limit the amount of time your hands are gonna touch the butter, because your hands are warm. As you can see, it's already melting, so you want it as cold as possible by the time you add it into the flour and when it gets into the oven. And I'm just gonna place it in here. So the less time your hands touch the butter, the better. Alright, so when you're mixing the butter, it's either you're gonna use your fingertips or you can invest in a pastry cutter. I like using this because it also limits the amount of time your hands get in contact with the butter. So when you use your palms, because your palms are hotter than the tips of your fingers, the butter gets warm quickly. But when you use your fingers like this, it takes time, but it works well to maintain the temperature of the butter. So you can use butter, your hands. I'm just gonna mix everything in. So you take the butter out of the fridge when you need to, not in the, I don't put it in the freezer, just on the upper end of your refrigerator. It should be enough. So you can use your hands like this, because usually people do it like this, but I feel like it just melts the butter. So when you're done, your dough should still feel chill to the touch. And another thing is that if you have like a large orders, let's say for instance you have two 20-liter orders and they are due let's say tomorrow. Today is Wednesday, they're due tomorrow. You can just wake up in the morning and make 10-liter, then mix. After you done making the first 10-liter, then you make, so that you can maintain the level of quality. Because when you tend to mix a lot of things, a lot of dough at the same time, things tend to just go wrong. I don't know why, but maybe the measurements are off. And also the another thing to keep in mind is that flour is very let me just say, it absorbs liquid very quickly. So imagine if you mixed a 40-liter worth of batter, and before it goes in the oven, it's just going to sit in the heat, because I get it, you made it in maybe in a large bowl, you can put it in the fridge. So when you use the pastry cutter, you just do this, and it's going to incorporate the flour and the butter together. So what I wanted to say before my camera cut the last time about the absorbance of flour is that the more the batter sits, is the more liquid the flour will absorb, and because it's hot, it's going to become warm, and when it becomes warm, it becomes sticky and it spreads out. That's why when you put it in the oven, it's gonna spread instead of rise higher and become flaky and moist. So you want to make sure that you keep your batter as small as possible so that you can quickly bake it without it having to absorb more liquid. Even though you put the right amount of liquid, it may still go wrong because the batter has been sitting for long. So to check if everything is incorporated, you can just do this, and the bits that are not incorporated will just come to the top, and you just do this and incorporate them. So one thing I forgot to tell is that your margarine should be 80% fat. So the fat is responsible for the flakiness of the dough. The best thing to use is butter because it's just fat, right? But hey, it's expensive. Just one brick of butter is like 70 rand. So I recommend either you use wooden spoon or stock baking margarine. Those are the best ones for me. Yes, so when it's done, you'll see that it holds shape like this because the flour is saturated with the butter. Alright, so I'm gonna do the eggs. So the 5-liter recipe calls for 3 eggs, which means if you're doing half of that, it will require 1.5 eggs. So we can't do that. So I'm just gonna use 1 egg because the less eggs the better. And then I'm gonna shake my Cup Maas. I always cracking the egg first instead. If I always crack the egg first, in case that the shell of the egg falls into the bulb, then I can see it and remove it, because it's already mixed with something that you can't really see it. Then 1 cup. Oh my god, you see, things happen and you forget. So I was supposed to use half a cup of Cup Maas because I'm doing half of that, but that's okay, it's not a train smash. That's the other thing I'm gonna show you when you mix the wet ingredients. Oops. And then just for the purpose, because I want to, I'm gonna add a splash of this orange essence. But if you want to add like different flavors like lemon, orange, it's best to use the fresh lemon juice than this. It doesn't give a great taste, but if you use fresh orange juice, it gives it such a beautiful taste because it's so potent and fresh. This one, it's not that great. And then we're gonna mix everything. My flour. Now to mix, I usually take another cup and I put it in there. The reason I do this is because, as you saw, sometimes you're human, you forget, or sometimes the humid is just off, and flour really absorbs liquid so quick, right? So I always use a cup to scoop the wet ingredients into here and mix it, keep on mixing until everything is combined. You find that sometimes you don't need that much liquid, it just happens. Sometimes it's the humid that day, maybe it's cold, maybe it's hot, so yeah, it's very complicated to work with flour. But all you can do is just control your processes, then you should be fine. So imagine if I had just dumped the whole thing in here, the whole dough would be wet, and that's not what we want. I always use, it's either a wooden spoon or the back of a spatula to mix, because again, you're trying to limit the amount of time your hands get in contact with the dough, because you don't want to melt the butter. So you can see that just a little bit, it already did this half of this flour mixture. So as you can see, you don't really need a lot of liquid. If you have enough butter in there, then you don't need a lot of liquid. So you just mix section by section until everything comes together. And you can also feel it by your hands. The dough should be between wet and dry, but moist to the touch. Then just need a little bit here. So you see, even if you make a mistake with the liquid, you can also control how you do it, because at the end of the day, we are all human, we make mistakes. And our dough is ready, you see. So imagine if I had dumped all of this in here. Look at that. That's a lot of liquid. And when you feel it, look, it's soft, it's saturated with the liquid. And that's how your dough should look, between dry bake, as you can see, the flour drenches in between wet, and it should feel warm, I mean wet and moist to the touch. Now you're just gonna flour your surface, and because this dough is so little, I'm going to put it all on the surface. It's okay if it has drenches like this, you can always mix it through. So when you're rolling out, you want to take the biggest dough that you possibly your hands can handle, because if your log, we're gonna roll it into a log, if your log is big and thick, your scones will be moist. Right, so you're just gonna lightly bring it together with your hands, pat it down, then fold and turn. Just want to work lightly, we're not kneading. And then fold again, push it just to incorporate, then again, then push it, then bring it in, then fold it again together, and one more time, then we're done. And then you just want to make the equal sides to form it into a log. Make sure your flour is sufficient enough. And I'm gonna do just a little on top, just to keep it moist. Anything that you can roll with, I use this because it's what I have. I don't have a rolling pin, so gently and you just want to feel with your hands. As you can see, this side is a lot flatter than this, so when you roll, you want to focus on these sides so that they can be even. So again, if you want your scones to rise higher, then your dough needs to be thick, at least 1 centimeter thick. As you can see, it shouldn't be too flat. If you have cracks, you can just go over them with your hand, so that when they go into the oven, they don't crack more. So I'm gonna put some flour onto the side so that I can use to flour my cookie cutter. This is a bigger one that I normally use because this is not an order. I'd like to make some jumbo scones, so I'm just gonna flour this. Then when you cut the dough, you don't shake it, you just press it straight down and remove, so that the ridges can be intact. You don't want to shake it, and also when you shake it, you run the risk when they go into the oven, they kind of collapse. Okay, but it's okay because they're homemade, you know, mistakes happen. This is baking, right? It's like rocket science. Okay, so here's my pan. I just prepared it with baking paper because the spray is technically finished. But if you're baking for business, please invest in this because baking paper tends to be expensive and it finishes quickly. So just make sure you spray enough so that they don't stuck. So I'm gonna place my scones on the baking paper. So And then for the remainder of the dough, you're just going to work with it lightly, because remember, you've already worked on it, so the chances of it being tough are very, 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 very big. So you just want to lightly put it together. Like this. And then flour your surface again into a log again. Then on top, and then roll. You can see it's quite thick. So here are the scones. 1 egg, and take a little bit of this mixture, the leftover mixture, just a little, add it in there, and we're going to mix it in. Then I'm gonna take a pastry brush and brush the scones. Then you're gonna bake them at 200 degrees Celsius for 20 minutes. There you go. They're soft, nice and golden brown, cooked. So now we wait for them to cool, then we'll cut inside them.